Welcome to the Procurement Software Podcast, where we aim to educate and inspire you about how technology is changing and shaping our profession. The truth is, there's never been a more exciting time to be in procurement, but only if you're one of those organizations that's embracing the change and driving new developments. And this podcast is all about giving you the tools to help you get there. So buckle up and let's get right into this week's show. Yes, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Procurement Software Podcast. We are the official podcast of procurementsoftware.site, where if you want to search and filter and find procurement technology solutions, you can do that without having to pay a fortune to an analyst company and in less time than it takes to boil an egg. Head over to app.procurementsoftware.site and we've got you covered there. Today on the show, we're going to be talking about the influence of technology on training and learning and development. And when I thought of this topic, I could think of no better person to ask to come on the show to talk about this than the founder and CEO of Positive Purchasing, Jonathan O'Brien. Jonathan, very warm welcome.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. It's an absolute honor to be on your podcast. Thank you so much for inviting me.
And Jonathan, I've been on your show as well, and you've got your own podcast called The Procurement Show, which I would very much recommend anyone to check out. It's a very professionally produced podcast. Jonathan's actually got background in radio that he doesn't talk about much, but you can tell when you listen to his podcast where that comes from. So before we dive in, Jonathan, Positive obviously was a training company initially. You've been going for more than 20 years, but you pivoted recently and now you have SaaS applications to complement what you're doing on the training side. Before we dig into the main part of the interview, just maybe explain to the audience your rationale behind doing that, because I very much think that it is interconnected.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we celebrate 21 years of doing this, in fact. And we started as a sort of training consulting business, helping organizations all over the world really sort of transform their procurement and negotiation capability. And we still do that. And it's still a mainstay of what we do. But we recognized about 7 or 8 years ago, really, that things were moving pretty quickly. And to do this, we needed to pivot to do something in terms of software and online. And we started coming up with a number of initial platforms, many of which have evolved into the portfolio of SaaS products that we have today. But we recognized that we actually have become more of a digital SaaS company in recent years than a traditional training company. But the two of those kind of converge, really, which is what we're going to talk about today, because there is a real link in terms of how technology will enable some of the future ways in which people develop their capability and will build their competence in terms of training, but also in terms of how they do it on the job as well.
And that's an interesting segue into the first question that I wanted to ask you, which is, coming from a traditional background as a training company, do you see a future for classroom-based training, or what do you see more broadly as the major trends in training and L&D and procurement more generally?
Yeah, if you'd asked me that question 3 years ago as we were coming out of the pandemic, I would have said, no, I don't see a future, because and the pandemic was really fortuitous to us, because prior to that, we had been trying to create this thing where all of the learners could kind of come into a virtual space and have really good training. And our clients said, yeah, it's great. We don't have to fly people all over the place. And then when it came down to it, they said, do you know what? Let's just fly everybody all over the place anyway and put them in a classroom. So we couldn't get it off the ground. It took a pandemic for people to suddenly get confident using all of the tools that we take for granted in terms of how we connect and interact in our day-to-day life. So what we found was actually at that time, we thought this is the future. It's all going to be online, but it's kind of gone back a bit. It's kind of the pendulum has swung and found a different level. About 30% of what we're doing now is back in the classroom, because companies have recognized that nothing happens better when you get people together in the same space to do it, especially for something like negotiation training. Now, online, we've managed to replicate that. There are lots of people that are doing training online, and most of it's really not very good. It's somebody who has a PowerPoint presentation that they're showing you on Zoom. That's not good training. Good training is where you have people who are engaged, cameras on, and they cannot disappear off and do their expenses, but they have to be part of that training. So you've got to set it up so that interactive experience is there. And you've also got to make it so that they are contributing and seeing how their contributions builds, which is where you begin to couple new technology with some of the desktop applications that we have for how we connect with each other. So classroom training will always have a place, but not to the degree we once did it. It will be for the special events, for the meeting once a year, for the getting the team together, for the things where in-person is needed. But the way that we work is online now. So the majority of that stuff will be either online, instructor-led live events, but also with a whole new generation of how we do e-learning. And that's evolving. That's a big changing area. Once upon a time, e-learning meant you'd watch some kind of poorly put together cartoon type thing and answer a few really simplistic questions. Well, that stuff's really kind of out of date. That isn't relevant. E-learning now is around how do you engage somebody to understand some key learning points in a way that they get exactly what they need and you can test their understanding. And if we then think about how people consume content, it's very much around bite size. It's very much around how do I get small amounts of information and how do I interact just enough? So the major trends really is around how do you balance what you do in the classroom with what you do online, with what you do in terms of self-managed learning in a way that reflects how people consume content in today's world.
I love that. It tackles one of the most common problems, which is always budget. So if you're doing live instructor-led training online, you alleviate the need for everyone to travel to a certain location. And yes, to a certain extent, you can mitigate the challenge of people's attention spans online being short by insisting that cameras are on and having very structured, coffee break and lunch breaks and running it to a very strict schedule. But you hit on another really good point as well, which is around this hybrid approach that it's very easy to go to either an instructor-led online training or an in-person training, go through, and no matter how good the trainer is, very easy to go back into your day-to-day role and forget what you've learned. And what you alluded to about having applications or having e-learning or having bite-sized content that you can then do to supplement that on demand is really fills that gap, doesn't it? And then, so would you say that hybrid training really is the best of both worlds in that sense?
Yeah, it is, but not on its own. It needs to be managed because what we have found, what we've had the most success with is creating a learning journey. Learning training isn't a sort of once only thing. Think about a soccer player. If a team takes on a soccer player, they take on somebody who's good, otherwise they wouldn't be there. They don't say, hey, you've arrived, that's great, you never need to train again. It's a constant daily upskilling, development, improving that, not just in terms of their soccer skills, but in terms of how are they going to work with the team? How are they going to fulfill the objectives that team has? So the same is true for procurement. And we make the mistake, companies make the mistake of saying, hey, I'm going to buy a training course and it's a one-time thing. That's not how people learn. Traditionally, we've done that because of the logistics around flying everybody to a single place. But learning is an ongoing journey, and it needs to be a combination of the stuff that we would learn in a classroom, whether that's online or in a physical classroom, stuff that we perhaps go and study ourselves. So, which is where traditional e-learning and the next generation of e-learning comes in, but also things like reading articles and books, but also around how we will learn on the job. Now, there's a curious thing happening here because traditionally learning on the job would be around how you watch other people do things. Now, tech enters the arena here because now we can learn on the job and interact with avatars, interact with tech that will teach us as if they're real, but it's not real. Just like a pilot would learn to fly an airplane with a flight simulator, once upon a time that wasn't possible, we're entering this new generation where you can learn to do procurement and negotiation in a simulated environment. And crucially, you don't need any new tech to do that. You don't need VR headsets and big complex tech. This stuff can be available on your desktop.
Yeah, there are two topics there that I'll park for now, but I will come back to a little bit later. So one is the continuous learning opportunity. And the second one is just the amount of content that's available aside from the more traditional procurement training methods that would have been there in the past. We'll come on to that a little bit later. I do want to explore that in more detail, but I wanted to explore before we did, why is training still the first thing that gets cut in a downturn?
Why? I wish I knew. I wish I had that answer. It is the first thing that gets cut in a downturn, in the same way that when organizations need to make cuts, they make cuts with their people, because it's the thing that's in front of you. It's the thing that's most obvious. It's the thing people think they can live without. It's actually really short-sighted, because whilst you might choose to cut some training in a downturn, what companies actually do is refocus that. Now, we have two types of clients. We have those that will cut training. We have those that say, hey, we've got this real problem. We need to sharpen our negotiation skills because we're dealing with this situation and the suppliers are getting the edge on us. And so actually we need to put everybody through some sort of really rapid negotiation training, or we need coaching to bring the training to life. So really, actually, what we should be doing in a downturn is thinking, how can we manage out of this? And what training do our teams need to do that? Sadly, that's not how most organizations think. And most organizations go into panic mood and just take out all the things that actually they should be keeping. I wish I knew why, but it is unfortunately the reality of how business operates.
It is, but I would also say that now, if we were to go back 10 or certainly 15 years, if the organization that you worked for cut your L&D budget, you were sort of cast aside and didn't really have much opportunity to upskill. Whereas at least now I would sort of challenge that back and say, okay, if you're going to take accountability for your career path, you can actually do that now by accessing all of the different free content that's out there. And yes, some of it is biased towards the spin that a certain software company or consultancy wants to put on it, because ultimately they're using it as a way to sell their products or service. I get that, but the individual now has a lot more options than they did even 15 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely, they do. And there's an assumption in there that people are going to take that responsibility to develop. And of all the clients we work with, if you take a typical sort of function, typical department, there are people in there that will grab that stuff and will seize it and want to learn, especially in certain countries. So in Asia, for example, when we work in Asia and train people, the moment we begin to give them content or begin to commence the training journey with them, they will absorb everything because they don't have that exposure. In other parts of the world, people are less interested, and you'll get those who are keen, and you'll get those who they're on training because they've told to be on training. And that's the reality of it. It doesn't follow that they're just not interested, but most of the time they're just too busy. It's one of the things I hear a lot, I'm really too busy. And then perhaps somebody will come to a training course and they'll say, well, I've got to drop out at 11 o'clock and I've got to do this and I've got to do that. And you kind of think, okay, you're only going to get out of this what you put into it. So that's what we're up against. We're up against the fact that not everybody will take that initiative, because you're right, there's lots of really good stuff out there. Not all of it, but if you look hard enough, you can find an awful lot of stuff that at no cost or at little cost. Indeed, just across the 5 books that I've written, I get LinkedIn messages from people all over the world who say, I bought your book and we've implemented category management in our organization just by working through your book. And that's fantastic, and they talk of each Monday morning, they sit down and they read a chapter in a group and they figure out how they're going to bring it to life. When you get people who are that determined to absorb something, they'll make it happen. So it comes down to the individual. But if you're a CPO managing a team, you can't assume that everybody's going to be that driven. You have to make them driven and drive it in if you're going to have it, if you're going to be successful.
Yeah, and we'll dig into the deeper side of technology a little bit later. We often get bogged down in the detail and the high level tech, but you raised a couple of really good points there around the more broader tech aspect, that now, even if you're in an emerging market country and you're not earning the same salary as someone in North America or Western Europe, everyone now that works in, if you're in Nairobi, or if you're in Sao Paulo or Bogota, you've got access to a co-working space that's got fiber optic internet. And you can probably go out and afford a subscription to an online course platform and buy, self-paced online procurement courses. I mean, even positive, you've got bite-sized training that would be affordable to that demographic. So
absolutely,
I do think that just if we approach tech in a broader perspective and just say the ability now through fast internet and streaming capability and online course delivery platforms has enabled that you don't need to spend thousands of dollars on a SIPS qualification now to be a competent procurement professional in an emerging market.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And, the thing about tech is tech doesn't make people want to do it. That is the thing. But in those marketplaces that you described, there is that dynamic of, I'm hungry for information because people are hungry. There's kind of more competition to be able to succeed because it's harder in some of those territories, which makes people more determined. And I think actually, if you look in the US and parts of Europe, we've become a little bit lazy because it's something that's much more easy. And so learning happens differently depending on how determined the individuals are.
Indeed. So how far can you get then with asynchronous training? Is it possible to train people asynchronously without any additional resources? Or do you, I'm playing devil's advocate a bit because I'm guessing you're going to say no, but so how far can you get doing that?
So let's be clear about what we're talking about asynchronous training, because that means people are following their own path, learning in their own way, and will learn at different paces and somehow reach some sort of common outcome.
Yeah.
So, and that's actually quite a good way of doing it. But the key success factor here is it has to be managed. So if you leave the learner to determine their own path, they will do something. Some will do more than others. You can make the resources available to the best programs are ones that start with an assessment of what's the skill level across the team. And that's an individual thing. Now you can look across the team and understand the whole, but you've done some sort of capability assessment. And I don't mean just asking them 100 multiple choice questions, as many of these things are. I mean, you've done a proper skills assessment, probably with some sort of interview to gauge their capability. And from that, you're able to determine that this is where this person is, and this is what the company needs. This is the skills the company needs that individual in that role to have. And clearly that will vary across roles. And that means you can design a learning journey for that individual. And that journey should have some events. Maybe it's classroom, physical classroom. Maybe it's a live online instructor-led event, and some things they do online, and maybe some general development activities. So you can design that journey, that learning journey for the individual. That bit can be asynchronous in the sense that they are working through that separately and independently, but it's a managed process. There are checkpoints. And if the learner doesn't progress through it, then somebody's saying, why are you not doing this? So to that extent, it works pretty well because it kind of plays to that people being able to work and learn in their own way. And that's an important thing because not everybody learns well in a classroom type situation. Some people need to sort of take stuff away and reflect on it. By having blended way of training people and managing people through that journey, then you can get everybody to where you need it. The key point here is it needs to be managed. So although it's happening individually, the overall journey across the team is being managed, and there is intervention if people aren't getting where you need them to get to.
And with what you've built with your business, that essentially does that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You've got the platform, which is Procleus, which is essentially
correct,
an app store for just to simplify what it does. And that enables you to do that assessment on an individual basis. But then you've got different avenues of learning, whether it's on-the-job practice or more formal courses, be that bite-sized or classroom instructor-led, which speaks to that point that everyone as an individual is going to have a slightly different journey or slightly different method of how they could best consume and retain that knowledge. And that's what I really like about how you built that, because you're combining something that's very offline, which is instructor-led training, which is with other things that are pure play software as a service applications to help you hone and perfect your knowledge.
Yeah, definitely. And that was the vision when we set out to build Procleus many years ago now, and it's evolved considerably in that time. It was going to be the place where you do the assessment, which it does, and it provides you with that learning journey. It has vast library of online assets that you can then take and are assigned to you according to that journey. And the ability to then come to the classroom and come to those live online events. But there's one other key component here, which is the toolkit, because what a lot of people do is they say, hey, we're going to do training, but they don't think about how people are going to do it. So we're going to teach people category management. And, that's something that we've been doing a lot of all over the world for the last 21 years. And there's two types of client we work with. Some say, I just want you to come and train everybody in category management. Okay, we can do that. But if you're going to do category management, you need to apply that. And you need to be able to go and work through the different steps and tools in the organization. So you either need the traditional tools and templates and a process to follow, or you need one of the next generation tools such as our Capella platform, the guided category strategy creator. The point is you need to combine the learning with the tools you're using. If you detach those two, then you're kind of teaching people how to ride a bike, but then you're giving everybody a small kind of ride on scooters to go and do something. So, well, you taught me how to ride a bicycle over there, but you're now giving me something different to go and do the job with. You've got to bring the two together. So you set up the common language, common process, common ways of working, the methodologies for strategic procurement and negotiation, and then you train people in it. Those things have to come together. It is astounding how many organizations don't recognize how you've got to kind of have both of those things, which of course is the differentiator that Procleus has because it provides those full toolkits as well.
Got it. And we've got 22 minutes through a discussion on training and we've not mentioned the AI word yet. So I'm going to have to drop it in. What role can, you could even think about it within your own Procleus platform.
Yeah.
What role will AI play then in this larger ecosystem in procurement training, do you think?
Yeah, so we're talking about real AI here, not the AI everyone's claiming that they're using and is powering all the world. I mean, it's going to power absolutely everything. So it's interesting because I think AI can play a really critical role, but the key thing here is how the LLM has learned. I mean, today you could go and ask ChatGPT a bunch of questions. It's going to give you some really good responses, actually. You could probably learn quite a bit about procurement just by asking ChatGPT the right question. But if you're going to structure learning in an organization and you want AI to do it, then the sort of things that's going to be doing is saying, if you're going to be doing a negotiation, you are perhaps interacting with an AI that's able to help you structure that negotiation plan. So this is something we built into the Ruby product, the guided negotiation plan creator. So it begins to guide you towards a negotiation plan and helps inform you as to how you're going to do that negotiation. Same with category strategies within Capella. So AI will help provide that way of doing training, perhaps through some sort of avatar interface. We're seeing the first ones of those emerging now. They're really quite early days and slow and embryonic, but they're gonna develop. So you'll have an interaction with some sort of AI that will teach you, but the teaching will be unique to you because it will know your competencies because it's done that assessment and it will be based upon access to the content. Now, within Procleus, our Poppy AI bot is going live very soon, which begins to do that. But one of the crucial things to know here is what is the pool of data that LLM is using to be able to do that? And if it's the stuff that's out there in OpenAI, then everything you put into that is going to be used by the LLM to develop its functionality and be able to then serve your competitors. You're effectively serving your competitors by doing that. If you bring it within house and you wall garden how your AI works, it means you can create a learning environment that is drawing on your content, but your competitors can't do that as well. That's when it becomes really interesting. So it's a crucial thing. Most people aren't getting this. They just think AI is going to be the future of everything. I mean, it is, but there's some big watch outs there. So AI in a careful, wall-gardened way that accesses specific, that learns on specific content will play a really crucial role for organizations and give a competitive advantage, but only if it's set up in the right way.
And like you said, doing things like skills and assessments, first of all, to be able to put together a tailored learning plan. Yeah.
And I think the AI can help do that, because today the skill assessment is based on a series of level assessments in an interview. Now, actually, AI can do that bit. You can do the skill assessment with an avatar that asks the right questions and makes an assessment. So, that's an obvious one. And then the AI knows your capability and can then begin to guide you through a learning journey.
That's interesting. So as I look to wrap this up, Jonathan, from what you've told me, the picture that I'm getting in my mind is it's more of an evolution rather than a revolution when we're looking at tech in procurement training. Would you go along with that?
I would, yeah. Don't believe the hype. If you go along to any sort of exhibition, you will be bewildered by all of the people saying, hey, we've got a thing and it's powered by AI and it's going to make your teeth whiter and change the world and solve third world hunger. There's lots of islands of technology out there. Some of it is quite brilliant. Most of it is quite embryonic. It's not really glued together particularly well. But you know what? It's moving really quickly. So yes, it's an evolution. The biggest barrier to adoption of tech is how fast companies are ready to adopt the tech, not the actual tech itself. In the same way that actually we have the tech today for cars to drive themselves, but they don't because we're just the squishy things that sit behind the steering wheel aren't quite ready for that. So, it's the adoption that is that puts the foot on the hose pipe here. So for that reason, it's an evolution.
Got it. Jonathan, always very insightful speaking to you. If anyone would like to find out more about what you're doing, both from a training and from a SaaS and an app side, where's the best place that we should send them?
Send them to positivepurchasing.com. Connect with me on LinkedIn. If you want to have a look at Redsheet, the negotiation tool, look at redsheetnegotiation.com. And if you're interested in Capella, categorystrategy.com. It's all there.
Fantastic. Jonathan, all the best. Speak to you soon.
Thank you. It's been a delight. Bye-bye.
So that's training in procurement and how is tech going to impact that? As Jonathan said, it's more of an evolution rather than a revolution, but not necessarily because the tech isn't out there. It's all about how we adopt it and how fast and how quickly we can implement it. So as with everything, if you don't train your people, you're not going to get the best out of them. So regardless of budgets, I would encourage anyone to consume as many online resources that are out free, of which this podcast and Procurement Software.site are two of them, but there are many other podcasts such as Jonathan's show, the Procurement Show, and other blogs, webinars, resources that you can do completely free of charge. As we said, it's not like it was 15 years ago where if you didn't have a training budget, it was very difficult to upskill yourself. Just one final thing before we sign off. We at procurementsoftware.site do have a monthly newsletter. If you head over to procurementsoftware.site and then go to our footer where it says subscribe to newsletter and pop your name and email address in there, we will send you our monthly musings on all things in the procurement tech space, who's got funding. And I usually do a 5 to 10 minute video as well, just explaining everything that's going on or what's on my mind that specific month around everything that's happening in the procurement tech landscape. Thank you again for listening. Take care wherever you are in the world, and we will catch you again same time next week. Bye for now.